Hi guys, it's Morgan, and I'm continuing my sporadic book vlogging with another Vladimir Nabokov book review. This time it's Speak Memory. This is the autobiography by Vladimir Nabokov, the author of Lolita and Pale Fire. My object with this video is, yes, to review the book, but also to discuss and explore this one particular idea, this one effect that has lingered with me since the time I finished Speak Memory several months ago. And that is the idea of biographical criticism, or the interplay between this book, Speak Memory, and the rest of Nabokov's corpus of fiction. And so I'll be referencing a number of other Nabokov works, so very mild spoiler warnings for this video. What is biographical criticism? It is the tendency for readers and critics to try to find reflections of the author's real life in his fictional works. So, taken to the extreme, this could mean that every novel is a roman à clef, where ostensibly fictional characters are stand ins for people in the author's real life, where every main character is a self insert, where beliefs and opinions espoused by the characters are the author's own personally held beliefs. Sure, we can all consider ourselves above such simplistic conflations, but with an author like Nabokov, I'm not gonna lie, some of those critics have a point. This guy's works are filled with doppelgangers of himself, with Russian emigres, with people who move from Europe to the United States, with academics, with writers, etc. So it's tempting to fall into this mode of biographical criticism and try to figure out what parts of a Nabokov novel are him inhabiting the fictional world of those characters, and what other parts are him just speaking as himself using the medium of a novel. Now, Nabokov hated biographical criticism. He mocked criticism in general, but he especially disliked biographical criticism, as commented on in a passage in his biography of Nikolai Gogol. It is strange the morbid inclination we have to derive satisfaction from the fact, generally false and always irrelevant, that a work of art is traceable to a true story. Is it because we begin to respect ourselves more when we learn that the writer, just like ourselves, was not clever enough to make up a story himself? Or is something added to the poor strength of our imagination when we know that a tangible fact is at the base of the fiction we mysteriously despise? Or taken all in all, have we here that adoration of the truth which makes little children ask the storyteller, did it really happen? And prevented old Tolstoy in his hyper-ethical stage from trespassing upon the rights of the deity and creating, as God creates, perfectly imaginary people? Of course, Nabokov would put it like that. But I get where he's coming from. The more you explain how a magic trick is done, the less you appreciate the effect of the magic. And so the more you try to nail down a author's works into some real life reality, the more it seems like you're hand waving away and vulgarizing the truly magical act of creation. But for all that Nabokov protests against this vulgar type of reading, he produced this book, which is an autobiography, which reveals on its face that this guy has plumbed the noble fuel of his own life to produce a lot of his fictional output. It practically invites the reader to engage in biographical criticism. Quick digression into what Speak Memory is and is about. Speak Memory was first published in 1951 as conclusive evidence, and then revised and expanded to its present form, Speak Memory, published in 1966. In between, Nabokov also translated this into Russian. It's commonly known as an autobiography, but it's not a traditional autobiography. It covers Nabokov's early life, his childhood, his education, his adolescence in pre-war Russia, then his family's escape from the revolution, his life in Western Europe, up until the point when he leaves Europe for the United States in 1940. It's also written in a very literary, very mannered, very deliberately artful style. It's not just retold to you. These are a series of themed essays which are arranged roughly chronologically in time. I'm having a little fun with him, but let's be clear. Speak Memory is a fantastic book. I loved it. It's Nabokov, so the prose is lucid and lyrical. I would constantly find myself rereading sentences just to appreciate their musicality, the alliteration, how they roll off the page. And the images that Nabokov chooses are so original, I would find myself thinking about them days or months later. That's on a micro scale. On a macro scale, the genius of what Nabokov does in Speak Memory is to join up random and disparate threads of his life and weave those events together into what can almost be said to be a design. It's what the narrator of Pale Fire does in that fictional world, but now Nabokov is applying it to himself. He is mythologizing and fictionalizing his own life. The structure of the book, with its themed essays, already implies that his life is more organized or thematic than it is, but Nabokov does this everywhere. He'll take any minor anecdote or event in his distant past and tie it into something bigger, some theme that has run its course throughout his entire life, and then have somehow disguised the fact that it was actually just an insignificant and random, uninteresting event to begin with, of the type that life just throws random events at you all the time, and you only see patterns because you are looking for patterns. I will use as one memorable example the incident of his first butterfly capture. Nabokov was famously into butterflies, and he describes the very first time he caught one in Speak Memory. He captures it and tries to etherize it in a cabinet, but it escapes and flies out the window. Nabokov imagines it flying eastward across all of Russia, timber and tundra, to Alaska, and then over to North America, and then southward along the Rocky Mountains, to be finally overtaken and captured after a 40-year race on an immigrant dandelion under an endemic aspen near Boulder. Leaving aside the poetry of his word choices, how he contrasts the immigrant weed with the endemic tree, Nabokov is choosing to create a narrative where he is meeting this same butterfly across the world and time, butterfly traveling east as he travels west, in this very symbolic spot where there's an immigrant plant and an endemic plant. After he's lost everything and the world is turned upside down, he's choosing to believe this rather than what actually happened, which is just that he saw a similar butterfly 40 years later. More broadly, Speak Memory captures how, through the application of art, a life of randomness can be sorted into, if not a life of order, at least a myriad of connected threads that might, if you squint, form some sort of tapestry. That's the magic trick. That's the wand that Nabokov is waving over his own life in writing Speak Memory. I see in Speak Memory the germ of some of those ideas about the contrapuntal nature of life and fate that will see their final form in Pale Fire 13 years later. This brings me to the idea that despite Nabokov's protests, you can use Speak Memory as a cheat sheet to the rest of Nabokov's corpus. The man doth protest too much. He's literally told us that he's a walking example of a self-insert. And by this I mean, as I was reading Speak Memory, I recognized memories that he adapted pretty directly into his fictional works. And Nabokov doesn't try to hide this. He tells you that these memories are diamonds that he later gave away to his characters to alleviate the burden of his wealth. I'll name some examples. There's the image of a table reflected in a window superimposed on the landscape outside in Speak Memory that appears in a train. But this is also the very first image in Pale Fire, the poem. More concretely, there is the image of a mother wearing the wedding ring of her dead husband tied with a black thread onto her own wedding ring on her own finger. This is what Vladimir Nabokov's mother does in Speak Memory, and it is also what the mother of the protagonist in The Real Life of Sebastian Knight does. More generally, the whole episode with Colette in the French seaside town parallels the Annabelle Lee episode in Lolita. And the very few understated sentences about Sergei, Nabokov's brother who died in a Nazi concentration camp, echo the tenderest parts of Penin, where that narrator recalls Mira Balachkin, who died in the Holocaust. And of course, the lost dream world of Russia itself is conjured so evocatively in Speak Memory, and I find echoes of it in Ada or Ardor, in the fictional American county of Lodore, in the anti-Russia of Zembla in Pale Fire, and then directly in the real life of Sebastian Knight or Pinin. And in that sense, I would recommend Speak Memory with utmost urgency to anyone who is a fan of Nabokov's other novels. This book will contextualize and elaborate on themes that he loves to linger on and disguise in various ways in his other fiction. He's more gentle and direct with you, and you can take what you've learned here and apply it to find more to think about and contemplate when you read his other books. That's the charitable way to approach the biographical criticism that Speak Memory inspires. The dark side to all this revelation is that Speak Memory almost demystifies Nabokov. It reveals how the magic trick is done, or if it doesn't do that, it at least gives us more ammo to become more potent and effective biographical critics. It's super ironic, and I'm sure the irony was not lost on Vladimir Nabokov when he was writing this. When I read Nabokov now, I am on the lookout for those real-life parallels. I simply know too much. The reflex to seek some original in the author's life is there, ready to be flexed, a reflex that has in fact been trained by Speak Memory. I don't think this diminishes the achievement that is Speak Memory. After all, beauty is its own justification. And Speak Memory has survived the test of time. It's listed on multiple best nonfiction of the 20th century lists and such like. But the meta question that is raised by Speak Memory, which I am proposing here to be the question of how to reconcile this book against the rest of Nabokov's oeuvre, his views on criticism, and more broadly, how to square an intimate knowledge of his life against his work, that I don't have a neat answer to. It's been said that art doesn't need to have neat answers to anything. It's beautiful and enough to just explore complexities and examine a question from multiple angles. And I would say that Speak Memory does that effectively. I would, however, posit that one way Speak Memory works to defy the tendency to biographical criticism is by giving you all of these details about Nabokov's own life, making it a very personal and particular life, and at the same time revealing that the author has already kind of fictionalized himself. This is a book of miasmic, very mannered, very designed prose. It's not off the cuff in any sense of the word, and you constantly get the sense that this is not real life. This cannot be real life. This is Nabokov in middle age, looking back, reinterpreting, recurating, crafting his own vision of reality. And of course, it's even more hilarious because this is already the revisited version of his autobiography, because it was published as a different book before. There are so many layers of reinterpretation going on. You have to appreciate it as the combination of art and life that it is. In reading this book, I felt like I was watching a brilliant and active mind, that of Vladimir Nabokov, sift all of his most disjointed, remote memories through the sieve of his art and have them fall into a pattern. It felt like seeing shapes in clouds. It felt like magic. I'll finish this video with Nabokov's own words on Speak Memory. He's mock reviewing himself in this originally unpublished chapter. One cannot but respect the amount of retrospective acumen and creative concentration that the author had to summon in order to plan his book according to the way his life had been planned by unknown players of games, and never to swerve from that plan. What did you think of Speak Memory? How do you read it against the rest of Nabokov's oeuvre? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for following along and watching me ramble. Bye.